بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. خب, alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq to continue our study of moral philosophy in Islam. We reached a discussion about ethical relativism. Can you see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I try to make it like a slideshow. Okay. We said that there are three types of ethical relativism: descriptive, metaethical, and normative. And this is a kind of division based on, you can say, the extent of their claim. So they are like, degrees and ranks somehow, because descriptive is something which is not very difficult, and you can accept it, you cannot accept it. It's not going to harm us, although we have issues with it, but even if someone accepts, it's not a problem. The main thing is the second and the third. And the second is the center, is the core. So descriptive ethical relativism says that, inshallah we'll talk about it, some or all moral values are fundamentally different, some or all. Metaethical is the one that makes a philosophical claim. It's not just reporting that there are fundamental differences. A normative one is the one that prescribes a policy. He says you should not pass judgment on others, you must not condemn them, you must not interfere, etc. So there are three types of ethical relativism: descriptive, some people call it also cultural relativism. If you study some books, they mention cultural relativism, they mean this. Metaethical, and some people call it epistemological relativism, and normative relativism, or normative ethical relativism. We start with the first one, descriptive ethical relativism. Definition and examples. Descriptive ethical relativism is the view that there are substantially or fundamentally different moral codes among societies or individuals. These substantial or fundamental differences are, because if there are minor differences that can be reduced to some underlying unity and common ground, that's not a problem. But they say these are fundamentally different. So those who are not relativists, or call them absolutists, cannot explain them. The only way to explain them is that to say the moral codes are totally different. Example 1. Eskimos are reported that they allow their old parents to die by starvation. Maybe they put them outside, or they leave them a place. They don't give them food till they die. They say, look, this is very much different from what we believe. We believe that this is morally wrong. This is horrible. You leave your father or mother without food. Example 2. Ruth Benedict in her book Patterns of Culture, reports that there is a tribe in Melanesia that believe that you should not help others. You should not collaborate, cooperate. You should not be kind. Let everyone do his or her own job. Don't help them. So they say, look, this is very much different from what we believe. We believe that, kindness is good, helping is good, collaboration is good. Example 3. This is different from the first and 2 examples, because the first and 2 examples are comparing one culture to another culture, one place to another place. The third one is about the same society. Poyman says, 100 years ago, the majority of people in the southern states of United States of America used to view slavery as morally right. They were even fighting in order to preserve it. The same people, if you ask them today, they would say slavery is wrong. So we are not talking about difference between northern states and southern states. We are talking about people in the South. They themselves now have different morality. There are 2 versions of descriptive ethical relativism: a stronger version and moderate version. A strong version holds that all, it's a very difficult position, to hold, but they say all basic moral values do vary from individual to individual or from society to society. Moderate version says not all, some basic moral values vary. Maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, but not all. At least there is one which varies a lot, fundamentally. Metaethical relativism is the view that among those substantially different moral codes, there is no single true morality, or there is no single morality which is most justified. They can be equally true, equally justified. More than one. Not every, as I said last week, they don't say every idea is correct, every morality is correct. They say there can be more than one, but not necessarily everyone. Again, metaethical relativism has a stronger version and moderate version. A stronger version says all those substantially different moral codes are true. Moderate version says at least there can be a plurality of true or best justified codes. The first one, I don't think anyone would really believe in it. It's just a possibility. The main thing is the second one. David Wong, that we talked about him last week, who has a book, Ethical Relativity. His PhD was on ethical relativism, and his supervisor was Gilbert Harman. He writes many entries in text, handbooks, etc., about ethical relativism. He says radical relativists hold that any morality is as true or as justified as any other. I don't know if this has any really proponent. Moderate relativists, this is more popular, such as Philippa Foot, Walzer, and Wong himself, deny that there is any single true morality. They have difficulty with saying it's only one. But also hold that some moralities are truer or more justified than others. So it's not that everything in reality, in a morality, works. Every opinion is okay. No. Some are not okay, some are better, some are more justified, but there is no reason to say there must be only one at the top. There can be 2, 3 that were most justified. Normative ethical relativism is the view that it is morally wrong to pass ethical judgment on the behavior and practices of another individual, group, or society. But what type of individual or group or society? Not those that belong to our own moral code. No. An individual who belongs to another social moral code or another culture, another society, if they differ with us in their moral outlook, we cannot judge about them ethically. So I repeat again, normative ethical relativism is the view that says it is morally wrong to pass ethical judgment on the behavior and practices of another individual, group, or society with a substantially different moral code, which is or can be as true or justified as one's own. If that person belongs to a moral system which is absolutely false, absolutely rejected, that's okay. But if it is also possible that that is good as mine, who gives me the right to condemn them? Let alone to try to make that other individual, group, or society conform to one's code. I cannot even pass judgment, let alone I force them to change or intervene in their affairs on the basis of such ethical judgments. For example, Western powers, if they have power and want to use it to make their moral standards accepted and followed by other people, cannot do this. Or Eastern powers, if they want to do this, they cannot do it. It's ethically wrong. Inshallah, later we will say that we may accept with this issue of non-interference, but still we are not relativists. We may believe that, for example, it is wrong to interfere in other cultures or other societies' practices and behavior, without saying that we cannot judge about them. We'll talk about it later. I always say, when you study another philosophy or religion, you must know that they have some truth. I don't think you can find any school of thought that is 100% wrong. If there was such a thing that was 100% wrong, then it was easy. We could just do the opposite, and then we had 100% presentation of the truth. But unfortunately, there is no 100% presentation of truth available to us human beings. We have to always explore, discover. Even if we have a revelation, our understanding of it has to be improved. People's interpretation of it has to be improved. We don't have any group who have understood everything 100% right or have misunderstood 100% wrong. We don't have such thing. The percentage is different. And whether you have understood the most substantial things or you have missed the most substantial. So percentage and which area you have understood is the main thing. Otherwise, if batil and haq were totally distinguished and separate from each other, people would have followed haq. So, normative ethical relativism says it's morally right to pass judgments on others if they belong to something different, totally, fundamentally different from us, and therefore we should not also impose our ideas, moral ideas on them, or interfere. History of the debate. The history of the debate between ethical relativism and ethical absolutism. I use absolutism opposite to relativism. Maybe some people say non-relativism. Some people have tried to say realism, etc., which I think is not very accurate. In my book, I have explained that realism has another meaning. So, between ethical relativism and ethical absolutism might be equivalent to the history of ethical thought, as old as the first ethical thoughts among human beings. The length and breadth of the debate makes the historical review of the literature on the topic very difficult. It's very widely discussed over centuries. In contemporary thought, moral relativism is notably founded on sociological observations of diversities. I explained for you, especially when colonialists went to other continents and explored the life of people, culture of people over there. The rise of modern anthropology encouraged people like William Graham Sumner, Ruth Benedict, and Edward Westermarck to reopen the old relativistic question of whether there is some absolute or objective moral knowledge or not. So this new information about diversity encouraged them to stress on the previous topic of ethical relativism. Luke's study shows that it was much discussed in the late 19th and early 20th centuries by different people like Wilhelm Wundt, Lucien Levy-Bruhl, some are from North Europe, and William Summer, and other people, Westermarck, etc. And it is still now and then addressed, according to Luke's study, by social anthropologists and some sociologists. And then he says that the topic somehow, this is very important, as I said last week, from 60s somehow went to decline. This topic has lost its central position in systematic social inquiry. So there is a change. If you want these references, I have them in bibliography of the book. An overall study of the literature on ethical relativism shows that unlike in the late 19th and early 20th century, the interest in ethical relativism has recently declined. Even most important relativist thinkers of our time, such as Gilbert Harman and David Wong, who have tried to reconstruct ethical relativism, have developed subtle or more moderate forms of relativism to meet standard objections on relativism, because they are aware that there are problems. In order to avoid those objections on ethical relativism, they try to hold more moderate version. They made more modest claims. Their relativism strictly dismisses the idea that in morality anything goes. They both believe that morality is subject to some rational constraints. So rationally you can sometimes say this morality is wrong, because there is no consistency. There is self-contradictory elements, for example. There are 6 self-contradictory elements. There are good and bad arguments for the moral position people take. But at the same time that they say there can be moral evaluation, they say moral evaluations are not leading to one result. We can dismiss some theories, but at the end maybe two theories remain, both capable of resisting against rational challenges. There are good and bad arguments for the moral positions people take. They both are also cognitivists. Cognitivists believe that there is, for any moral judgment, possibility of being true or false. It's very important. According to emotivists, you cannot say moral judgments are true or false, because it's just like saying bahba. You say, something is good, it's a bahba, well done. There is no true or false attached to it. So, but these people are relativists and at the same time cognitivists, since they accept that moral claims have truth values. Even some of their critics, like Arrington has a very good book. He is from Georgia, state of Georgia University, and he's the one that, alhamdulillah, I met in a conference in the UK on moral philosophy, about intuition, and I requested him to read my thesis before I submit it and comment if he has any ideas. And alhamdulillah, he read part of it when he was in the UK still, and then when he went back, I said, I can wait till you get time to read more, and was very good, very also encouraging for me to have his comments, and most of them were either positive or just things about wording, etc. I very much liked his book. So Arrington says that these new ethical relativists have so much restricted and limited their versions of ethical relativism that maybe they are no longer ethical relativists. So even some of their critics of David Wong and Gilbert Harman, have really doubted whether their theories are really relativistic in a proper sense or not. Now, let us start with evaluation of the first type, which is descriptive ethical relativism. Descriptive relativism, in its strongest form, suffers from lack of evidence. To say that all moral values are fundamentally different needs a great amount of evidence. There is no such evidence. In fact, it is practically impossible to investigate the truth of such a claim inductively, through istiqra, through induction. Who has been able to talk to all individuals, to travel to all societies and cultures, and then compare all of them with each other and say they are all totally different or fundamentally different? Since such an investigation demands knowledge about all individuals and societies across ages and across cultures, the strongest form is also contradictory to the fact that many moral principles and values have been common among the majority of people, and in some cases among all reasonable human beings and typical civilized societies. So not only they cannot prove it, we have counter proof. Even some people have argued philosophically that some values must have been common among all human beings, otherwise they would not have been able to continue on this planet. If parents, for example, parents love and support for children, if this was not morally good, then human children were not able to survive, and then human life on this planet was finished, terminated. Or if morally children were not supposed to be good and kind and respectful to their parents, if we didn't have such morality, then children would have been very rude and very bad and unkind to their parents. Then parents would decide not to have children, so we would have no, again, human life on this planet. As we see already, when some people see their children are not very good, they decide not to have children. Or when they see other people's children are not good, they decide that they don't have any children. They prefer to have maybe some pets, or sometimes the reason is this, not always, but sometimes if to have a dog is better, because this dog is not going to make life difficult for me. I have control over this dog. This dog is very loyal and gives me some company. I'm not feeling alone. So why I should have children that later, when they become teenagers or young, they may create lots of problems for me. They may kick me out from my home, for example, and take over everything. Things like this may come to the mind of people. And if this spreads, then people decide not to have children. So if this moral understanding was not there, that parents should be helping their children, children could not survive, and then we could not exist in this planet. Or if there was no such moral responsibility that children should be kind and grateful to their parents, again we had problem. And also about truth in statements, in a speech. They say if there was no such common value that people should tell the truth, we would not have had languages, we would not have had any communications. So some moral philosophers have argued philosophically that there are common values. Some people have argued based on empirical data that in all cultures you find these things are common. So a strong form is not possible to hold, to say all individuals and cultures differ fundamentally in their values. Therefore, then I say descriptive. So, descriptive relativism in its moderate form is more tenable, it's more possible to be held. But it still suffers from the fact. It's true that their claim is more reasonable, more acceptable, because they say some. But it doesn't mean that every example they say we accept. We need to look into their examples. Like the examples I mentioned, 3 examples before, actually many of them are questionable. Because many of them, when we investigate, or all of them, we find deep in them there is commonality. So descriptive relativism in its most radical version is very difficult or impossible to hold. In its moderate form is more tenable, but it still suffers from the fact that many examples which are mentioned by relativists are either irrelevant to morality. For example, it's about customs. Sometimes they make examples about, people when they have mourning. Some people have, they put on black dress, some people white dress. This is not morality, this is customs. Some people drive on the right, some people drive on the left. This is custom, this is law, this is arrangement, this is not akhlaq. In my book, I have a discussion about the difference between morality and customs, adab wa rusum. Many examples which are more reasonable still we need to investigate. And those which are not reasonable, of course, like those which relate to customs, we have to leave them aside. So many examples which are mentioned by relativists are either irrelevant to morality or do not show fundamental differences, because they go back to more underlying commonality. In any case, descriptive relativism as such, in either of its forms, can be accepted. Whether you talk about moderate or a stronger version, it doesn't harm. Yes, how true it is, that's another issue. But maybe someone says there is a set of value which is true, which is universal, but I accept that people have different opinions. No problem. Even people have fundamental differences. Okay. It doesn't harm the truth. In other words, as I will mention later, look at this beautiful point. I very much like this point when I first read it. Who said that if there is truth, everyone should agree, so that if they differ, we say there is no one truth? What argument you have to say that if something is universal, it must be accepted by all, so that if it is not accepted by all, it's not universal? It's aks naqis. P then Q, not Q then not P. If it is universal, it should be accepted by all. If it is not accepted by all, if there is difference, then it is not universal. Who said if it is universal has to be accepted by all? There are many facts, even in science, that people didn't agree. Even not only didn't agree, we go one step further. There are facts that people agreed on the opposite, like the earth being flat. It's a fact. Did people agree on it? No. Actually, people agreed on the opposite, apart from, prophets and, masumin. Scientists all thought, and following scientists, all other people thought that earth is not flat, or earth is the center and sun is not the center, and earth goes around. They had the opposite view, that earth is going around sun, sun going around earth. They had this opinion, center is earth. So there is no argument, there is no proof that when something is true and universal, everyone should believe. So in any case, descriptive relativism as such, in either of its forms, can be accepted by objectivists or absolutists, because their belief in a single true or most justified morality does not require any level of agreement. We cannot say 100%, 90%, 70, 60% of people should agree if there is a truth involved, if something is most justified, something is true. There is no level of agreement required. Just as physical facts may be both true and disputed, there is no agreement. Or even agreement can be on the opposite side. So, descriptive relativism, in summary, first of all, it doesn't cause any problem, it doesn't harm us, but the reality is that it's not very strong. Examples are challengeable. For example, about Eskimos. Actually, Eskimos have similar morality like us. The reason they leave their parents outside, for example, or let them starve, is because parents themselves don't want to be burdened. When they see that there is no enough food, because they have a scarcity, shortage of food, when they see there is no enough food, Either they have to die all, or they have to let people who can work and can bring food and look after the community remain. So they volunteer to die because they don't want to burden on others, and finally all die. Whether we agree or not, that's another issue. Maybe we say no, they have to do it, or they shouldn't have to do it. But you should not think they are strangers. They come from a different world. They have moral considerations like us. They love their parents, and it's because the parents want this that they do this. I'm not saying whenever your parents want you to, put them outside, for example, you should do it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying this is the conclusion that they have made based on their ideologies, outlooks, physical problems they face. They came up with this idea. But moralities are the same. How they prioritize, that's another issue, but moral values are the same. Please remember this very important point. In my understanding, based on my research, individuals and societies mostly agree on values, mostly. Their difference is mostly, again, in how much they add and attribute significance to those values, and how much they prioritize them over others. Therefore, in conflict of values, differences can be seen. This is very important. This is a result of several years of work. I'm saying just one sentence. The difference is not whether they have same values or not. Most of the time, cultures, societies have similar values. But how much attention, how much importance, significance they attach to each value can be different. And therefore, when it comes to conflicts where you have to prioritize, you see differences. Like the issue of abortion. Some people may give priority to the right of mother, some may give priority to the right of child. But if there was no conflict, if there was no problem, no one would say, you can abort, or you ignore the right of the mother or lady whose womb is going to carry this baby. Priorities, when there are conflicts, determine what type of moral choices they are going to make. So, about ethical relativism, we have issues with the examples, etc. Evaluation of metaethical relativism. The standard objection to the argument from descriptive ethical relativism is that because many of these people use a descriptive ethical relativism as their proof. And what is a strong objection is that there is no way, there is no logical, implication that if you believe in descriptive ethical relativism, you must believe in metaethical relativism. So I say there is no direct path from descriptive ethical relativism to metaethical relativism, because this is a philosophical claim. That is an empirical claim. You cannot argue from existence of differences a philosophical claim. The mere fact of difference in ethical codes does not imply that the codes are equally true or justified. Such variation is in itself merely a truth of descriptive morality, a fact of anthropology. Okay, suppose we accept it. which entails neither a first order nor second order ethical view. So neither you can argue from that for saying that there is no single true morality, nor you can argue for normative ethical relativism. Go one step further and say also you cannot then pass judgments and you cannot, interfere, etc. There is no way to go from what people believe to what really is the case. There is no logical implication here. Even if all people agree on something, is it a proof of truth? No. Let alone majority or 50% agree. No, we say even 100%. Therefore, we don't accept. I'm sorry. Yeah. Is it being recorded? If it is recorded here, then I can use. Is it record? Okay. So we just continue with this. This is why we don't accept even ijma as hujjah. We say consensus without having a support, additional support, like if ma'soom is included, or we can understand from ijma the opinion of ma'soom, then ijma is hujjah. Otherwise, ijma of people by itself is not hujjah. So the standard objection to the argument from descriptive ethical relativism is that there is no direct path from descriptive ethical relativism to meta-ethical relativism. The mere fact of difference in ethical codes does not imply that the codes are equally true or justified. Even if you say they have equal adherence, 5 million believe in this, 5 million believe in that, okay. This doesn't mean that they are equally justified. Such variation is in itself merely a truth of descriptive morality, a fact of anthropology. It's an empirical data. How many people accept this? Which places in the world accept this? How long they have been accepting this? Which entails neither a first order nor second order ethical view. There is no way to go from what people believe to what really is the case. There is no logical implication here. Okay. Inshallah, I will expand more on metaethical relativism. This was just the standard objection. Inshallah, maybe in the next session, we can go into different forms of arguments for metaethical relativism and show, because as I said last week, sometimes they use just descriptive ethical relativism, sometimes they try to add something to it, and those things that they add also would not solve the problem. And then normative ethical relativism. Bernard Williams says that this view was popular among some liberal colonialists. Some people who were not acting as dictators. They had more much more broader vision, and they were also somehow liberal. Sometimes liberal, to be liberal, sometimes it's good when it comes to respecting others. But when it comes to imposing their ideas on others and asking everyone to be liberal, that can be a problem. But sometimes it's good to be liberal. So, especially among British administrators in West Africa and the like, Williams admits that despite inconsistency of this view, it may have had a beneficent influence at that time. So it was good that they respected African culture. And still today, Britain is one of the places that they appreciate and respect diversity more, because they are aware of this diversity through centuries of encounter with other cultures when they went to different, countries. I think Wong is also right that normative relativism is often defended by anthropologists, perhaps in reaction to those Western conceptions of the inferiority of other cultures. Unlike what we said now, we have also some elements, some pockets of people, influential people, some politicians, sometimes journalists, that instead of respecting other cultures, they think Western culture is superior to other cultures. And then normative ethicalism is a good way to stop them. But our point is that you don't need to be relativist to say you should not condemn others because just they are different from you. We accept you should not condemn others just because they are different from you, or because you are very rich or you are in a developed country. You don't have right to condemn others or interfere. We accept some of these ideas, but we don't go the path of relativism. So you have to always be fair. If there is something good, to see it, to acknowledge it. If there is an issue, you say, okay, there's a problem here. But again, how much this problem should be emphasized on, we have to be fair. I think Wong is also right that normative relativism is often defended by anthropologists, perhaps in reaction. So this nice approach of these anthropologists was reaction to those Western conceptions of the inferiority of other cultures that played a role in colonialism. Evaluation of normative ethical relativism. In general, adherents of normative relativism, including anthropologists and non-anthropologists, argue for it, or for what they call principle of tolerance, which is very similar to normative ethical relativism, from descriptive or metaethical relativism. Sometimes directly they quote differences and they say we should not condemn others. Sometimes they use metaethical relativism. But metaethical relativism by itself is dependent on descriptive ethical relativism. So directly or indirectly they use descriptive ethical relativism. I said, I have not yet observed any other argument. I have not seen any argument apart from either descriptive ethical relativism or metaethical relativism. So if you refute descriptive ethical relativism or metaethical relativism, there is no ground remaining for normative ethical relativism. The problem with the former, i.e. the argument for the normative relativism from descriptive relativism, argument for and from, you are familiar with this. From is the premise or premises that you use, for is your claim. So the argument for the normative relativism from descriptive relativism, other than the problems with descriptive relativism itself, is that it ignores the logical gap between the empirical fact of the diversity of morals and the non-empirical normative claim of necessity of non-interference. It's a philosophical claim. This is something which cannot be understood from collecting facts and data. Actually, the relativist has to agree that whether to judge about others or not, or whether to be tolerant of others or not, can be one of the things on which societies may disagree with each other. If you are a relativist, especially a metaethical relativist, because you need this for normative ethical relativism. If you believe in metaethical relativism, so why then you don't allow people that in their moral system they think they should pass judgments on others to have the right to pass judgments on others? Because if moral laws are to be universal and are to be available for all, then you need to be able to exercise it when someone else is doing something wrong. The problem with the latter, i.e. the argument for the normative relativism from metaethical relativism, other than the problem in metaethical relativism in itself, suppose metaethical relativism was correct, suppose, how you argue from that for this is that there is no clear way that metaethical relativism can lead to normative ethical relativism. Moreover, normative relativism is standardly criticized as incoherent and self-refuting. It seems to prescribe for all individuals, groups, and societies something universal. It says to everyone, believe in an ethics of non-judgmental tolerance and non-intervention. But this by itself, you are taking it as a universal thing, so it's self-refuting, it's not coherent, it's not consistent. When it comes to this principle, you say it's not relative, it's absolute. If I pass judgment on those who pass judgment on the behaviors of others, but with different morality, I must condemn myself, since I have tried to impose a value of tolerance on everyone, even if they have no such value. Yes, if they have such value and don't observe it, you can say, okay, why you are contradicting your own system? But if they don't have such a thing, and in their own system they should pass judgment, they should do something about others who do wrong things, how I can expect from them to observe my value, which is, non-interference or non-judging. So, I repeat, if I pass judgment on those who pass judgment on the behaviors of others with different morality, yeah, we are not talking about someone passing judgment on a member of his own society or culture. That's not the problem. The problem is people from different ethical codes should not pass judgments on each other. If I do this, I must condemn myself, since I have tried to impose a value of tolerance on everyone, even if they have no such value. But this is not what I am supposed to do under the strong version of normative relativism. Of course, this is very important. As I mentioned, we ourselves, although we don't believe in relativism, we have concerns about how to judge others, and especially how to interfere, or whether to interfere or not. I may say that universal values are there, everyone should try to find them, but no one has the right to say, my values are universal ones and you have to follow it. That's another issue. I may also accept this. So you don't need to be relativist so that you condemn interference. Yes, we may say there are issues that we need to interfere. If, for example, it's the issue of slavery, if the issue of, killing innocent people, we should interfere even if someone says, in my moral system there is no problem. But even how to interfere, for example, if you want to stop apartheid in South Africa, okay, we have moral responsibility to pass judgment on it. We need to condemn. We need to make sure we don't collaborate with them. But how we are going to stop? If we have, for example, a stronger army, should we attack them and cause a war for this? That's another issue. No, we may say you have to engage in discussion, in dialogue. I don't know. You should not support them. You should do campaign for equality, equity, etc. So there are lots of things. It's not that everyone who is absolutely says, you must interfere, and everyone who is relativist has to say, no, you have to withdraw any action. Some relativists actually may be dictators. And some non-relativists can be very democrats. So there is no such implication. Of course, an adequate moral system certainly sets up some practical rules as how to behave in a multicultural world or society. There is a great difference between practical compromise and doctrinal compromise. We don't compromise in a doctrinal way. If slavery is wrong, it's wrong everywhere. But whether we have to practically do something to stop it, that's another issue. Moral compromises are forced on people by circumstances, and we should not think that they change the moral quality of action. Sometimes in practice we have to compromise. We cannot expect the world be run as we want, even according to our own moral virtues. Maybe people don't observe these virtues. When we are forced to compromise practically, what we need to have for our action is an excuse to show that it is wrong, but circumstances forced us to compromise. But when theoretically we change our idea or compromise, then we need a justification. So, as I said, maybe there is a slavery and we cannot do anything. So practically we need to compromise, let this continue, but find ways to maintain it, to regulate it, to change it, to stop it as soon as possible. But maybe for some time we need to compromise in the sense that we cannot fight over it. But those people who theoretically compromise, they say, no, it's not a problem. They can have this forever, or as long as they want. Circumstances support excuses and do not serve as justifications. This is very important. Circumstances support excuses. You may be excused, you may be ma'zur, but you are not muwajjah, you don't have justification. Then about tolerance. Passing judgments on practices of others is different from enforcing one's moral values. The normative relativist certainly accepts that one is entitled to pass judgments on the practice of people with the same values. But can he assure us that one is always entitled to enforce those moral values on them, even if they have the same morality? I said, even people from your own culture, that you can pass judgment on them, still you may say, I cannot interfere. For example, even with my children, even with my brother, my cousin, my uncle, who belong to the same moral code, adhere to the same moral code, maybe sometimes they do something wrong and I wait. Maybe sometimes I have to wait for a good condition. Maybe I have talked to them, it didn't work. Again, I have to wait. It doesn't mean that I have to interfere if they are adherents to the same morality. Interference, enforcement is different. For example, in a society, maybe they all agree on moral values, but can government come and enforce moral values or not? We have to measure. Sometimes we have to enforce, sometimes we have to just leave it for the people's choice, because morality, and not every moral thing is a legal thing. There are lots of considerations here. So they cannot say that even for people of the same society, interference is allowed. My idea is that whether to enforce or not, it's another issue. You may allow enforcement or you may allow interference when people believe in the same morality or when they don't believe in the same morality. It's another thing. As enforcement of values in this case is wrong, and passing judgment on others is not wrong, it becomes clear that wrongness of enforcement of one's values on others who have different morality does not entail wrongness of passing judgment. So passing judgment is something, interference is another thing. And absolutists also might be reluctant to enforce moral rules on the people with substantially different values, even with people who share values. It's not that we interfere all the time. Commitment to tolerance is different from normative relativism. If you want tolerance, okay, but if you say you have to be normative relativist, it's different. And also, there is an issue that David Wong says that, many people who say normative ethical relativism, they actually are influenced by what he calls contractual liberalism in the West. So that is background of their idea. And that is to do to others what they expect from you and they want. If they don't want it, leave it. This kind of liberalism, which says your morality is based on contracts, whether they want or not, then has led to these people become normative relativists. Commitment to tolerance is different from normative relativism or from contractual liberalism. An absolutist also might agree with tolerance, either because he thinks that interference would do more harm, or because he thinks that one should properly understand others' practices before passing judgments. Lack of tolerance may be a strong obstacle against understanding. So we may believe in tolerance to some extent, but we are not relativists. There are cases in which no one, including ordinary relativists or liberal relativists, no one hesitates to pass judgments or even interfere with practices of people from substantially different cultures, such as prohibition against torture. If someone says in our culture torture is not a problem, for example, government or police or army can torture in order to find out criminals or spies, etc. We don't accept. We say no, no human being should be tortured, no matter what your moral system says. Or killing of innocents. These normal relativists, do they allow people to torture and say we don't even condemn you, we don't pass judgment? Or no, they don't accept this and they try to interfere. They use United Nations or their own power to stop them. Of course, as Wong himself has admitted, what one is entitled to do in the light of such judgments is something else and needs to be studied independently. So we say there are universal values. We can evaluate others' behavior based on these universal values, but what to do with them That's another issue. Can I judge? Can I interfere? This is another issue. Okay, Alhamdulillah, we finished this quick review of 3 types of ethical relativism. So this is enough for most of the discussion in the books about ethical relativism, but inshallah we can go into more detailed discussion next week about some arguments for metaethical relativism in addition to descriptive ethical relativism. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.